thinking a lot in our current time about the Philosopher King concept from Plato. The idea being, in his view, and it was actually when I went back and read it. There's a lot of complex nuance to his view of kind of the ideal government. But one of the core tenets of it is that it's ruled by a philosopher king. The idea being that philosophers are lovers and seekers of wisdom and kind of true knowledge, which I guess we would talk about in terms of like thinking better, achieving that highest level of perspective and understanding and awareness, understanding the value of objective truth and truly going after it. Those are the people that are best suited to rule, because in theory they will make the best decisions. They will make the right decisions, and they won't be swayed by some of the things that I guess I would say normally kind of trick the mind and fool the mind and get us to abuse power or start to sacrifice truth for simplicity, all those types of things. They would know that and they would avoid it. So it sounds great. And the question is it realistic, right? What's the use of that? Is it something that we could ever actually do or would ever actually exist? You start to ask yourself that, and part of me wonders if Plato actually didn't mean it to be something that's real and could ever exist, but it's the thing to aspire to. You'll never get that. You'll never get the perfect person who understands all absolute truth or objective truth, but you should get as close to that as you can. That's the yardstick you're trying to meet, and I get that. I think from a logical perspective, that's probably how I assume it. But you could take it from a practical perspective too, and say it's somewhat related to this concept of the benevolent dictator, that would be the ideal form of government. I think it's very similar, the Philosopher King, and it I guess ultimately, if you believe in it practically, it suggests that there is kind of true knowledge. There are true answers, if you will, and somebody could know them, or at least know most of them, and that's the perfect person to lead. That's who you're striving for. So again, if there's any degree of reality to it, that's actually a practical use, it starts to get tricky for me, because there's a high degree of certainty in that. Which is obvious almost to an extent, right? When you talk about objective truth, truth is it is the truth. There should be certainty in the truth, because it's what you're looking for. So it starts to make you wonder on like a very philosophical level, kind of an abstract meta level, is truth itself, is there any form of certainty or any form of knowledge or whatever that is truly certain? In Plato, the way he speaks of that, he talks of the forms, which is some of these principles that support the political system he wants to put in place and what he believes. He speaks that a little bit, and his view is that there is kind of this pure objective truth, and it's eternal, and it's perfect more or less. It's unquestionable. It's obviously right. And again, those words just hit me as I don't get it. I don't see it. But then the other part of me does and says, well, it's the truth though. Again, it's the thing. So, again, I guess it comes back to the question of does that really exist? Are there right answers out there? We just don't always get them right. And if a person in power or a person's making decisions and they get most of them wrong, obviously things can go bad. If they happen to get lucky and get them all right, things can go amazingly, and sometimes you're somewhere along that spectrum, and that's kind of what it is. So for all these decisions, for all these topics, all these political debates that are happening right now, in theory, there's a right answer. There's an objective truth of what path or course of action should be taken. It's almost, I think of it, it makes me think of like a multiple choice test. Like the right answer is there. You just have to figure out what it is. And again, I sound like a broken record now, but as I keep exploring that idea that exists, it just keeps stinging me but it can't, like that level of certainty to to believe something is beyond question almost in and of itself defeats it, right? It's inherently can't be the truth if it can't be questioned. Questioning is such an integral part of the truth that I think, again, as soon as you remove it, it's no longer truth. It makes it up. It's part of what makes it truth. I think that's ultimately where I land on that. And I wonder, how that sits and how that compares to Plato. In some ways, it almost feels like infinity, where it's if I'm even using that term right, but where it's you're never at the truth, but because you're seeking it in such a pure way, you're almost closer to it. You almost hit that mark. Because that's what it's meant to be. It's meant to be you never being sure and you just constantly questioning. That's actually the truth. That's what it is. And why would that be, right? Well, because things are so random. Things are so interconnected, and it's so hard to see how one move is going to lead to another. Things change, perspectives change, values change. Everything is moving and fluid. So it would make sense that the truth would be as well. And that's I guess back to Plato's point, the Philosopher King. To me, that would be the Philosopher King, the person who accepts that there's no truth, there's no certainty in any of this. And the way you handle it is you assess things, you break them down, you do your cost-benefit analysis, you do the math, you get in the mud, you use empathy, you use humility, you keep yourself in that form, constantly questioning, never being sure, making decisions, of course, but constantly questioning. And as I said before, and I kind of mentioned the infinity point, as I say that, it feels like it's approaching what Plato was getting to, and maybe that's what he meant to some extent, and it's just the translation of it. That Philosopher King, that person that has true wisdom or true virtue, is that person that understands you never stop questioning. It certainly didn't come across as much as that. It came across more as this ideal thing that you just have the answers, that there were answers, I guess, and you have them. So I'm not sure if it aligns exactly, but it's my view of it. It's how I think about it. If I think about who I'd want to lead America or whatever it is, that would be the skill set that I think I would seek most, because you're getting somebody who's going to absorb all the information, who's going to seek out the experts and assess them and weight it correctly. We've talked in the past about within our minds, there's this kind of 3rd grade, 8th grade level math that one part of our mind does, and there's the PhD level on the other side. Use the PhD. It's the same in this. Somebody who is master level at understanding how to question and how to do the right analyses and how to weigh things appropriately, how to check their instruments and understand where there's a blind spot, that person would be that benevolent dictator, that Philosopher King. The interesting thing, and I'll end on this, is that you can make an argument that somebody like that, and I think Plato gets to this, wouldn't want to rule. They wouldn't want to be in a position of power because they know how dangerous it is. And Plato speaks to that too, I think, in his piece. But I would say, from a very logical perspective, that person in theory should recognize that there's a duty to it, as Plato kind of speaks to. There's a duty that because you have that skill, you owe it to the world or to society to do the right thing. So I'll end on that. Somewhat philosophical. I guess I've been in that mode of going down some rabbit holes there and exploring topics. But it's interesting to do that, to just kind of try and leverage a lot of the things that we talk about and let it go loose on a topic and see where you kind of end up at.